All right, guys, we're here to talk about it. The Oklahoma Sooners, they beat the Cincinnati Bearcats in Nippert Stadium. The first road game, the first true road game for Oklahoma, because let's be honest, the Tulsa game, it wasn't it. It wasn't the game that was going to challenge Oklahoma on the road. It was primarily a lot of OU fans. So yeah, this was the real test. This was the first test for Oklahoma. And they kind of showed out in a 20-6 victory. I said it over on the Horns Down podcast yesterday. The scoreboard really doesn't tell the whole story here for Oklahoma. 20-6, this game could have easily been 34-6 for OU because Gabriel overthrew a receiver, Andrew Anthony, which would have been a score because I think he was down there by the 5-yard line. And then you had another one where Dylan Gabriel had a fumble in the red zone, which isn't ideal. But you know what? You take a 20-6 victory and you see the defense was the part of the team that came out to be the leader here. You will take that any day of the week because that's not something Oklahoma has actually been accustomed to in the past. But today, guys, we're going to give you 3 points or 3 takeaways from the game on Saturday and talk about where can Oklahoma improve and kind of ask some questions in those 3 points. Because just like me, I'm sure a lot of you guys have questions as well, because when it comes to the offense, when it comes to these running backs, when it comes to our secondary, and then it comes to penalties, you have questions about how can OU improve in those areas. That's what we're here to talk about. But if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and hit that like, hit the subscribe button. And guys, if you are watching this live, I want you guys to jump down in the comments below. Let me know what y'all's thoughts are. What are your reactions from the 20-6 victory for Oklahoma over the Cincinnati Bearcats? Only the third time that these two teams have matched up in history. OU now pretty much owns this at 3-0. The first time you saw it were in 2008. If you guys remember, that was Oklahoma's national championship run, dominated Cincinnati that year. And then you had the game in 2010. It was a little bit closer, but hey, you know what? Oklahoma got the victory, and that's all that matters. You want Oklahoma to have their supremacy on these teams when they go play them at a conference. So Mike Hauk, one of the OU strategic athletic directors, I believe that's his title, put out an interesting tweet today that I want to go ahead and talk about, because my first point from takeaway from this game is the defense looks really good. And this tweet kind of talks about it. National defensive ranking, number 4, or 4 games in out of 130. We're 32nd in total defense at 309.5 yards per game, 26th in rushing defense, 94 yards per game, 25th in red zone touchdowns, 71.4%, 13th in pass efficiency defense, 102.4 rating, 11th in third down defense, where we only allow 28% in conversions, which is really good because I feel like that's an area where OU has struggled heavily over the past couple of years. I mean, how many times would you see a quarterback on a 3rd and 19 play take it 20 or 25 yards and get the first down on a 3rd down when Oklahoma should have easily gotten a stop? And I think a lot of that's going to equivalent to Oklahoma just has better tackling. 11th in tackles for loss, 8.2 a game. 8th in turnovers gained, 10. 2nd in interceptions, 8. Let's be honest, that Tulsa game really helped Oklahoma out there. And you're 2nd in scoring defense at 8.5 points per game. And what this really tells me with the points per game is Oklahoma is bending, but they're not breaking. And you can kind of see that, right? In yards per game, you can see where, okay, it's not exactly where you'd want it to be in yards per game. It's a lot better than it has been, but they're not giving up the scores, which is important. I'm okay. If you want to give up 500 yards of offense to the other team, that's okay. If you only allow that offense to score 3 points on 500 yards of offense, that means that defense did their job and kept the offense out of the end zone. Now, I don't want to see a team gain 500 yards on us. I'm sure it's going to happen at some point, maybe not this season with the teams on our schedule, but it'll happen at some point. But it'll be okay as long as this defense does not break and give up those points, because it makes it harder to be able to go out there and score if you're constantly having to catch up to what the defense is allowing. So Starting at point number one, the defense looks really good, right? The defensive line looks like the best part of this defense, which is crazy to say because that was an area where Oklahoma, I felt like, really struggled last year. But you can see it in the run game defense. This team is only, I think they're allowing just a little under 100 yards per game through the run yard. Yeah, 94 yards per game through the rushing attack. That's really good. And I know a lot of people have had questions about, hey, well, why is this defense getting more sacks? They're not applying a good enough pressure to the quarterbacks. My argument to you on that is sacks don't always equivalent to how good a defense is applying pressure to a quarterback. And most notably is if you go back and you watch these past 4 games with Oklahoma, this defensive line has done a good job at getting into the backfield, causing pressure on the quarterback to where he has to come out of the pocket. But then when he gets out of the pocket, containing the quarterback so he's not running just wildly on you, which is, I mean, if you guys think back to the Kansas State game last year, that's what happened. They were applying pressure. They were getting to the backfield. But some of these quarterbacks, they're just so athletic, it's going to be hard to get to them. I mean, think about it. If you were playing Caleb Williams, you're not sacking Caleb Williams very many times because Caleb Williams is really good with his feet. So as long as you can flush him out of the pocket, but contain him when you flush him out of the pocket, I feel like your defensive line is doing what they're supposed to. Now, a lot of that's going to be accredited towards Danny Stutzman and Jaren Kanak because those guys have played really well in cleaning up the holes that the defensive line are potentially missing. So you've seen it in a couple games yesterday where Danny Stutzman and Jaren Kanak were coming in to that line or they were in the backfield because there was an opportunity for them to clean it up. And Danny Stutzman, I think, is somebody that we have to touch on for the defense, where he currently has 13 total tackles yesterday, 7 solos, 1 sack, and 3.5 tackles for loss. Danny Stutzman, if you guys remember and have watched the show and have watched me on other people's shows, you all will remember that I said Danny Stutzman could potentially be a Butkus Award winner if he has a good season under Brent Venables. And I said, hey, you saw it over the last couple games of the season where Danny Stutzman really got into his own. He really started to buy into what BV was selling him. He hit the room where the film room. That's what I'm thinking of. He hit the film room. Danny Stutzman hit the gym. He worked on himself. He worked to better himself. And you saw it towards the course of last season, towards the end of last season. Now, unfortunately, it really didn't mean much for Oklahoma because you still had a 6-7 team. But Danny Stutzman has carried that into this season. And if Danny Stutzman continues to play at this level, there is no reason why he shouldn't be considered for the Butkus Award, which if you're Oklahoma and you have a Butkus winner on your team, then what's that going to do for linebacker recruiting? Maybe next year, if there's a Sammy Brown in the class next year that Oklahoma's in for, maybe you don't lose the Sammy Brown next year because you have that guy on your team that shows Brent Venables is still able to develop linebackers just as well as he was at Clemson and his previous times at Oklahoma. So another point that I look at underneath the defense is the secondary needs a little bit of work, but it's not bad, right? Billy Bowman, still that dude. You didn't have Reggie Pearson travel with you yesterday. Gentry Williams got that PI call, but what are you going to do? I think they have a receiver that's 6'5", 6'3", and 6, and I think their tight end's like 6'4". So unfortunately for Oklahoma, you're just going up against big receivers and big tight ends. You're going to have PI calls. The defense isn't going to look great, or the secondary is not going to look great, but the defense did what they needed to. And a player in that defense or in that secondary that you can really look at is Key Lawrence, because Key Lawrence has really stepped up and answered the question of who is going to be that second corner that was going to be able to step it up and play alongside Woody Washington. Well, if we go and we look at what Key Lawrence has done this season, especially yesterday, where he had 3 total tackles, 2 solos, and he had an interception, Key Lawrence this season has a forced fumble. If you guys remember, he came up behind the receiver and knocked it out. He has 2 interceptions, 14 total tackles. Key Lawrence draft stock is rising. And as a senior, this is a guy that maybe, depending on how well of a season he has, maybe right now he's probably a 4th or a 5th rounder, but maybe he could work himself up into a day 2 or a day 3 guy. Just some thoughts there. But to end it all, BV is being more involved in this defense like he told us he was going to be. BV told us he had to have his hands in there more. And that's not saying Ted Roof is a bad coordinator. It just meant, hey, these guys might need a little bit more time to learn my defense and to be able to call it. So I might need to be there to help them out a little bit and be involved. I might see things that they're going to miss. This happens at work all the time where I need people on my calls. I need people to help me with my quotes because although I'm asking questions and I'm observing things, having more eyes and more people on that call, somebody else might pick up on something that I didn't pick up on. And that might be what this is with BV. Okay, second point of the day of what we can take away from this OU Cincinnati game. Offense isn't where we want it. And I know we're spoiled because we've had an offense over the past several years, even in the Lincoln Riley eras, that was just absolutely phenomenal. But I think it was Joe Klatt, I think, said it yesterday. Don't tell Lincoln Riley that this offense will run faster at times than Lincoln Riley ever did. And it's true. I think there's times where you watch this offense and it's running so fast that the defense isn't even adjusted yet or in position when they're snapping the balls. I would like to see a little bit more of that. Sometimes they're still having to slow it down. But overall, the offense isn't where we want it. You got to start with the running back, right? There's so many questions there. And you're kind of asking yourself, is there problems with the guys that we have in this room? Because preseason, we were talking about this running back room being the deepest running back room in the country. Yes, the deepest running back room in the country. Yet, we haven't really seen a whole lot of Sawchuk. We haven't seen a whole lot of Javante Barnes. Why? I know they were recovering from injuries, but were the injuries that bad to where we're already game 4 in the season and we haven't seen a whole lot of them? Not to mention, Tawi Walker was a dude that was, hey, he was pretty hot. And now all of a sudden, yesterday he only had 5 carries? I'm kind of wondering what's going on here. Kind of wondering what's going on with the offensive run game. And I think this, I had a point on here underneath the offensive side. It's just called Lebby. That's just what I titled it, was Lebby. And I kind of wonder what's going on because why was the run game so, like, why did we have such a hard time getting plays established for the run game? Like, my wife will tell you all the time that when I'm driving, it's one extreme to the other. Like speed or I go too slow. She doesn't think there's ever an in-between when I drive. And I feel like that's what we're seeing with Jeff Lebby, right? It's one extreme to the other. You have days where he's running the ball 35 plus times, maybe even 40 times. The running game looks really good. But then you have days like yesterday where the passing game is primarily where they're trying to hang out or where they're having a lot of success. And you're like scratching your head going, why? But there's no in between. There's not this extremely balanced offensive scheme. Now, I will say this, BV pointed out, we had several long drives yesterday that just turned into field goals. That's something you want to work on as well. You want to work on, hey, I get into the red zone and I'm going to score the ball. I'm going to put that ball in the end zone. So something we'll need to watch out for as well. And a lot of that's going to come back to the running back play. When we get into the red zone, you need your running backs to be able to really pound that ball, pound the rock into the end zone. Gabriel overthrows. I know a lot of people are going to point this one out. And although some of you guys here in the live chat aren't pointing out Gabriel overthrowing the ball, I know some people are going to go back and watch this will. Listen, Dylan Gabriel, he does overthrow the ball at some times. And I had questions about what he was doing yesterday. And I have a group text with Jay and Cooper over at Unfair Sports. If you guys haven't checked them out, you definitely need to. I'm pretty sure almost all of you, though, that watch this have watched them at some point. Jay and Cooper, one of them mentioned and said, hey, it looks like when Dylan Gabriel goes out there, he already has his mind set up of where he's throwing the ball. And then I started watching the game a little bit more in detail, and I was like, oh, wait, it is. He'll snap the ball, and he's looking this way the entire time, and he's not paying attention to what's going on in the middle or the other side of the field. Now, is that a Dylan Gabriel problem, or is that what Jeff Lebby's telling him to do? Because if you guys remember, this was a problem even with Lincoln Riley, where Lincoln Riley wasn't having his quarterbacks go through their complete progressions. He would just tell them, hey, if option number 1 or option number 2 ain't open, you're running the ball. Now, although we didn't see Dylan Gabriel just go, hey, option number 1's not open, I'm running it, he would just throw it to option number 1. So I want to see Dylan Gabriel fine-tune that a little more, whether that's actually him or Jeff Lebby. Hey, you know what? I understand Jeff Lebby might be telling you this, but maybe you need to do this if it's open on the field. My third point of what we need to take away from this Oklahoma-Cincinnati game is Oklahoma's got to clean up these penalties, guys. And I pointed it out. This was one of the things I talked about in my pregame preview, actually, for the past 3 weeks, which is you can't go into conference play giving up this many penalties. Well, yesterday they gave up 8. Luckily, you were fortunate to have lost the penalty battle, but still win the game as well as you did. I hate to tell you, though, you go into Texas, you go to TCU, you play some of these better Big 12 teams, which there are some that are on our schedule. You can't give up 8 penalties. You can't give up stupid penalties that you can clean up. And so, hey, it's as simple as that. You're going to lose some because the Big 12 does not feel like are going to be very favorable to you or Texas this year. Oklahoma and Texas are going to have to fight the refs. But guess what? You can do it. You can fight them, and you can do it in a way where you can go out here and you can eliminate the stupid penalties that you're causing that were actually penalties. So I want to see Oklahoma clean those up because I just don't feel like that's something that you can take into the Big 12 play and really be successful as a team, right? These penalties are only going to hurt everybody else. So Oklahoma, though, are 4-0. And this is one of the better defenses that we've seen from Oklahoma. You have a Danny Stutzman who is in contention at this point for the butt kiss. If nobody is putting him in contention there, then you got problems. You have Dylan Gabriel right now, who has a yesterday had a 68.4 completion percentage, but has a 78% completion percentage on the season with 92 completions on 118 attempts, 12 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Guys, Dylan Gabriel is playing really well. And although he might not be a top 3 for the Heisman at this moment, if he continues to play like this all season, you would imagine you will see him in New York at some level. And I would love to see Dylan Gabriel in New York wearing the Polynesians. They have these cool like necklaces with the flowers and stuff on them. I want to see Dylan Gabriel in New York wearing some of those like flower necklaces things. I think that's so cool. And it would be so cool to bring that to New York and have Dylan Gabriel representing Oklahoma there once again. I'm there to back Dylan Gabriel every step of the way because although he frustrates me at times with some overthrows, Dylan Gabriel is just still that dude. He's still a really good quarterback. And hey, I guarantee you Alabama fans would take Dylan Gabriel right now in a heartbeat. So when y'all think to yourself, hey, Dylan Gabriel ain't it because we got Jackson Arnold back there, think about the schools right now that are struggling at the quarterback position. Oklahoma State, Alabama, some of these schools, they would take Dylan Gabriel. So guys, I really want to hear from you. I want to hear what y'all's thoughts are. Go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Later this week, we're going to be bringing you some recruiting news because Oklahoma is starting to heat up again on the recruiting trail. I feel like maybe we should see a commitment here in the next week, hopefully, from what I've heard. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're tuning in the show. We'll bring you some more intel there, probably either tomorrow, which is Monday, or Tuesday, depending on when you guys are watching this. But guys, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys next time.